Right. Hi guys. We meet again today. Okay, so I can see we have 7 people already here. Let's get started so we can cover as much as we can. Right. So hi, Binta, Susan, Obasi, um, JP. Good evening. Okay, so if you can hear me, go ahead and drop a message in the chat if it's clear. If you can see my screen as well before we kick off. Okay. All right. So I believe everybody should be able to see my screen. I'm sharing my. Let's try to make this a bit bold, probably without the image. Let's see. Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So yesterday we actually covered a couple of things here. Let me quickly pull that up. So this is what we did yesterday. Yeah. All right. Let's zoom in as well. Okay. We actually did something, simple, which is right here. So we're able to, use the CDN, right? That was the first thing we did yesterday. I'm going to explain this again. I'm going to just run through some of the things we did, and let me also zoom in very well. I want you to see this clearly. Okay. So we're able to run through some of these concepts yesterday. Working with the CDN, right? And we also created a project, my blog app using the CLI. Okay, so the CLI command line interface and the CDN, so Content Development Network, right? So we basically have this posted on the CDN, right? And Content Delivery Network. Sorry, we have this hosted on the CDN, and we were able to just pull this in using the script tag, right? And we had access to Vue. We had access to Vue in our project. So for example, you're working on a basic application. So now I'm going to try to do this really fast. I did not. I want to show you, like a realistic use case. Of course, I did not come up with any design whatsoever, but we're going to try to render a simple blog, right? We're going to render a simple blog post on the HTML web page that we have here, right? So let's just go ahead and we want to do this with the CDN first, at least, so you can see that if you're working on something, you should be able to create something like this. Okay. So of course we're going to utilize this same code. Let's just copy that. Let's create a new folder here. So this is more like a 5 to 10 minutes revision of what we did yesterday. Let's go ahead and call this um, CDN view blog posts. Okay, view blog sites or something like that. Okay, let's do some casing here. SB. Okay. All right. So in here we have a new file, index.html. So you see, this is just an HTML file, right? So I'm just going to have the HTML tag like this, HTML. Okay, we're going to paste that inside the body. By the way, I'm not using a VS Code, so I'm going to paste that inside the body here, and we'll just have like our H1 that says simple blog, right? Blog, that is H1. Come on, H1. Okay, so we have the head. I'm going to close that head. We have the title. That's title. And we also close the title. Okay, so simple blog. Right. So this is pretty straightforward. Remember, you have the div, and you're going to put the ID of the app, right? So that you can have access to view within that div. So that's going to be more like our base div, okay? And in here we can simply have, yeah, let's put our H1 right here. So simple blog, and then we have that div. So this div is simply going to render, some blog posts that we have within data, right? So we're going to call that blogs. Okay, that's an object. So basically, it's an array of objects. Okay, so this is an assumption that says our blog has, let's just comment this for now. Our blog has, series of items. So we have like blog ID. Let's call that article ID, the article ID, for example, or just blog ID. So that also works. This is like one, okay? Can be a number. Blog title, um, blog, silly mistakes. Okay, so blog title would say simple blog one. Okay, so now we have, we're just going to have two blog posts here. So this is two. Let's put in a description, blog description. Okay, so how I wish I could just, put in the old lorem ipsum thing here. This is a simple blog here with Vue CDN. All right, so we have this, and I forgot to put a comma there. Let's just copy this and drop it in here. So now we have two objects, right, representing our blog. In an ideal situation, you probably have this blog somewhere. It can be on a backend, probably on you're using like a headless CMS service, right? Maybe Pocket Base or Strappy, These things I'm mentioning are just services that you can utilize, okay? So it doesn't matter. Wherever you want to, have your blog sit, whether it's a regular backend Express application or one of these CDN, so long you have access to an API, right? Which we'll talk about in details in the future. But from the methods, you can simply write a simple code here that will fetch these details. We're not doing that now, and I don't want you to bother about it if you have not done that before. We'll get to that, okay? So for now, we just have a blog array, which you already know. You already know what this is. This is an array. If you know JavaScript, we've taught you JavaScript, taught you array, okay? And now these are objects. So you have two objects within that particular array, okay? All right. So one thing we're yet to do is to bring in the scripts, okay? So let's just go ahead and copy that. We dropped it in here earlier, so we have that script. So this is exactly what would give us access to Vue, right? Let's drop that in the head, okay? So just to verify that this works, let's go ahead and say maybe we have a blog title here, right? Name of our blog, and we'll say Mav's blog, right? So this is Mav's blog. So I'm going to simply do this, put this in here and say this is the blog title, right? More like this. Okay. Let's go ahead and open this up in our browser. All right. So this is our browser right here. So I'm going to simply say open index.html. Nope, not that. We have to first go into CDN view, right? Blog site and open index.html. Okay, so that should open up that website here. So you see we have Mav's blog, which means that this is actually working. Vue is actually active on this project. Okay, and then next we want to render this. So we did this yesterday, but let's just do that again. So div, we have v4. That is the specific directive that we're using here, which is for creating loops, right? So we want to perform a for loop, and we'll simply say, now it can be I in blocks, right? It can be anything. It can be Mav in blocks. It can be blog in blocks. Now, the ideal pattern is when you're working on this, it makes sense to say we're trying to reference each blog inside blocks, right? So saying blog in blocks makes sense, okay? Each individual item inside the array makes sense. If this is called maybe card items, then it makes sense to say for card item in card items, right? So you understand the singular plural thing, okay? It's just a pattern, okay? Now, if you can use for I in card, you can use for A, for B, right? For CHI, it can be anything, okay? So, but it makes sense to follow that, pattern, okay? So this is blogs, and each item in blogs is, of course, a blog, right? So just in case this is confusing you, I hope I've, clarified that. Okay, so now we have this div that will basically, render based on the amount of times, on the amount of blocks we have. Okay, so I can go ahead and just say I want H2 I want h2 to give me the blog title, right? So that is for the h2. H2, yeah, okay. And then I have like the p tag, right? That gives me the blog description. So let's just grab that. So we have the blog description. So that's going to be the p tag. Okay. So let's save that. Let's go back to the browser. Let's refresh to see what we have. So now you see we have the blogs. Okay. And of course, now that you have this, you can choose to probably style this. So you call this the blog card, for example. Probably you put in a parent class called blog grid. I mean, whatever you choose to, however you choose to arrange this. Okay. So now we call this the blog grid, and then we'll call this the blog card, right? So we can just add a very simple style here. Let's just say we have style, close that style. So we have the blog grid, right, which is the style, display of grid, and we can simply say grid templates columns. Yep, I think that is how it's done. Auto fit. Uh, yeah, I'm not mistaken. Yeah, so I think this is it. 300px, 1fr, maybe a gap of like 30px. Okay, so that is just to give us the grid, right? That we need. Okay, and then the card itself can simply come in here. So call that blog card. So this is just styling, right? So you can have like yeah, so you can just say a border radius, maybe 20px, and border 1px solid black. Okay, with a padding, for example, of 15px. All right, so that is the simple style there. Let's see. So this is what we have, right? So we have our blog, and the blogs will be arranged. So which means if I should have a new blog in here, so let's call that blog 3, right? So simple blog 3, simple blog 2, okay. Let's just say this is a simple blog 2 here, or blog 3 here. So okay, so the point is now this is easy for us, right? The flexibility is just there. We have 3 blocks there, and if we have more, it will automatically arrange itself in there. So this is 6, this is 5, 5, 6, 4, right? 4. So we can also change that 4, 5, 6. Save that, and if I refresh, see we also have our blocks. Okay, so I hope that makes sense. I hope that is not overly complex. We have not started working with forms and all that, but I wanted you to see um, how simple it is for you to get started with using Vue CDN. And yeah, I mean, if you have simple projects like this, you probably don't want to go the route of CLI. If it's just something simple, but if you do have plans to say I want to be scaling, adding more pages, like creating a lot of pages. This is not just my personal website, not some simple project that will remain simple for a very long time. Yes, it then makes sense to go ahead with the CLI. Eventually, you are not going to be doing something far from this, apart from having different pages, components, and all that. So we're going to be looking at components today, right? So we're going to be looking at components today. Well, if you have any questions, let's say in the next 1-2 minutes, drop your questions in the chat so I can take that while I move on to discuss the CLI again. We're going to create a new project, right? Yes, we did one yesterday, but we're going to create a new one this time around. We're going to bring in the Vue Router. We're also going to work with components, and we'll follow the documentation so I can explain a couple of things here step by step. Okay, so I'm waiting for those questions in the chats while I'm waiting for those questions in the chat. All right, so let's start from the template syntax here. So we have tried this right now. Okay, you have seen me use this double curly braces, which is also known as the mustache sign in Vue, right? So of course, the message item here is collected from the data object. Okay, so the message item there is taken from the data object. So you would have like message. Okay, you have like message, just like what we did here already. So we have blog title. So if we change the blog title to, let's say, Amaka's blog, I refresh, of course, that is going to change to Amaka's blog, right? Okay, so that is exactly what we see going on here. All right, so the mustache tag will be replaced with the value of the message property from the corresponding component instance, and it will also be updated whenever the message property changes. Yeah, so whenever that particular item change, it will be updated. So there's this data binding thing. You know, we're going to look at that, right? But just to show you how that reactivity, reactivity actually works. If you have a form, so if we have a form right here, okay, and let's just assume that this our form has an input type of submit, right? And when we submit, we probably want to change the value of something. We want to change the value of something. Let's also include another input type text. The placeholder can be enter text here, right? And then we have like V model. So V model is basically going to give you a binding, right, to a specific data. Okay. So if we call this maybe log title change or something, let's just call this. Let's just call this. Oh yeah, block title is fine since we already have block title there. Okay, let's just call this block title. All right. So you see, that there's that V model you're seeing right there. Okay. So this block title right now is pointing to this block title you see right here. All right. If we refresh the page, we are going to see that form. Oh yeah. So what you see now is that the form appears within every card. That is not what I want to do. So I'm just going to put that right here. Okay. Not within the the for loop. I don't want it to happen within that loop. Okay. So I just want a simple interface here where I can put in a value. Okay. So when I put in that value, I can have a button, right? So you see I have a button right here, and I can say change blog title. Now this is giving me that action, right? It's giving me that action, so we can have the value of change blog title. I believe this is how you do it. Let's refresh just to verify. Okay, so change blog title. Okay, all right. So we don't have that action yet. Okay, the V model is basically binding, so we're binding this right to that value. So I can simply go ahead and put that action, right? And I can say, if I click on that function, if I click on that, I should probably change the value that I have here, which is the blog title. Let's collapse this. So I can change the blog title, for example, by saying this dot blog title equals maybe something else, right? Let's just say hello world, for example. Okay, so yeah, so we can simply bind this to say while we're changing, while we change the value, this is exactly what would happen, right? So you see, that actually changed. Okay, but I mean, I would basically explain what you're seeing happening here. That is not a big deal. So I mean, the fact is this page is being refreshed whenever I submit, right? Because it's a form, and when it's refreshed, it goes back to the default. Okay, yeah, I mean, there are ways you can stop that from happening by using what we call let's talk about this when we get to forms. I don't want this to be so complex already, but yes, there are ways you can actually stop that from happening. Most likely you can just say, okay, let's take it out from the form and let's make this a button, right? So to avoid that having it refresh. But I'm going to show you how you can control that behavior within the form. Okay, so if you have a button instead and you just say at click, you don't need the value. You just take this outside of the input field, um, close the button, and you drop this here. Okay, so if you refresh, so now this is just a regular item. So now you see when I refresh, it's not taking the value I put in here, by the way. Okay, but I mean, I would also show you how to do that. It's taking the value I put in here, but it was able to change that block title based on the value that I statically entered in there. Okay, so I'll show you how to basically perform this binding. Right, I'll show you how to perform this binding. It's not taking the value I have in there, and I will show you how that would work. Okay, so we'll get to that. Yeah, we'll get to that. So we'll get to that. Let's just, what's the time? Let's quickly create the CLI. right? And when we create the CLI, we'll look at that, reactivity and how to use vbind, right? So we'll look at how to use vbind and also how to, use that V model that I wanted to show you right now. So let's go ahead and create that new project. I'm going to go back to my terminal. Okay. Remember, you can always follow the documentation here. So if you want to create an application, let's see, the command is right here to create an application. Okay. So now I just copy that command. Let's go back to the, okay, 300. Yeah. Okay. So now let's drop this in here. Forget about this error. This is basically my terminal. Okay. So now we're trying to create the project and we'll say another CLI example. Let's just do example. Okay. So TypeScript, no, JXS, no. So now this is for the Vue router that we're looking for. Okay. So we want to say yes because we're going to explore working with Vue router today. Okay. So let's click on yes. And let me zoom in on this. See it well. Okay, so let's click on yes. It's asking us if we want to add Pinia for state management. We don't need that for now. We don't need this other item. So let's just go with no for the rest. Okay, so now we need to navigate into that directory. We need to install. So we'll say npm install, right? Okay, and then finally after installing, we'll run npm run dev. Okay, so if you have any questions while we're waiting for this, please go ahead. It will take time. It depends. It depends on your network. So you should have good network when you are trying to install these packages. Okay, so that is done. So the next thing we're simply going to navigate. We're going to run that command npm run dev. Okay. Yeah. So let's do that. So let's do that. We're going to run npm run dev. Now, npm run dev is going to run our application. Ideally, you would want to open that up first with your VS Code or whatever code editor you're using, right? So I already have one that I am using. Let's open here. So you see we have another CLI example. Let's go into that CLI example first, or that CLI example. So I am right in there in my terminal. So when I want to execute a command, I can do that from here. Right within the another CLI example, yes, we explained, these folders yesterday, the package.json, right? JSconfig, index.html, app.vue. If you were not in the class yesterday, do well to check out that video. Okay, so this is the router. Okay, so we'll get back to this, but this is basically how we will be able to route from one page to the other, right? If you check the app.vue, you're going to see we have router view. Okay, so I will get to explain what this is doing here, but it's going to allow us to move from one particular view to the other. You see we have nav with router link taking us from home view to about view, right? And then if you check out the views, this is the view section here. Now you see we have the about view and we have the home view. Okay, yeah, I mean I usually create my projects and I call these pages, right? But it makes sense that this is also called the views. It doesn't really matter. I mean, it's up to you. The major thing is when you are performing that import, right? You can choose to say, okay, when I'm performing the import in my router, let's go back to the router. When I'm performing the import, I want to just say slash pages, right? If you have pages, what is views? So this is where you import all the pages you have, right? So when you import those pages, you should be able to move from one page to the other. Okay, so you can also import the page like this. This is called lazy loading. Okay, so you are importing the page when it's needed, basically, right? We'll get to explore that. We'll get to explore that. Let's start off, with talking about components. So let's start off with talking about components before we get back to that. So um, let's jump into components basics. Okay. All right. So after talking about components, I would also mention the lifecycle hooks. I mentioned this yesterday, right? So we are going to take this one after the other, but components is basically what we should discuss in today's class. Okay. So the idea of components is pretty straightforward. So the idea is that you have a page, right? So look at this example. You have a page, and within this page, you have maybe the header section. This is the header, right? Your regular HTML. You have your header, right? You have aside. I'm sure you know these components. You have aside, and within aside you have item, right? So you have the item elements. So you see we have three item elements in here. Okay, so the item itself is a component. Aside, right, is a component. The main section right here, you see we have two articles in there. Okay, so 1 and 2. I don't know if you can see this well, so I'll zoom in. All right, so you see we have the header, we have the article, we have the items inside that article, inside aside. Sorry, this is aside. So we have items inside aside. Okay, we have the main element here, and within the main element now we have those articles, two of those articles, right? So what are the components here? The article itself, can be made a component of its own, right? The item in here can be made a component of its own, and the header can actually be made so you can have a component that you render on this header section. Okay, so you can actually have a component that you render on this header section. The idea is we're making it a component because we want something that is reusable, something that we can change the values and reuse it at any point in time. So if we present it in the home page, we can change the values, change the image, or whatever it is we're presenting on that particular component. If we're using it in a different page, we can change those values as well. And it seems like you're presenting different items. Meanwhile, you are simply presenting one, and you are only changing the content of that particular piece of content of components, right? So the components would allow us to split the UI into independent and reusable pieces, and think about each piece in isolation. Yeah, so you are able to think about each of those sections in isolation. How does it work? What are the contents that would come in, right? And how would it be presented eventually? So yeah, I mean, thinking about the presentation, it's that will probably happen when you are now on the main page, trying to present those components on your layouts. But ideally, you are able to implement that component independently. So unlike the way we did this, so take a look at what we did here. This is the HTML project we just worked on. So unlike doing it this way, we can now create this block card in a separate component, in its own page, right? Its own view component. When we are done with that, if we want to now present blog cards, we just have to import that component, attach the data. So we'll just attach this data. Where is the data? Okay, I have it right here. So we just have to plug in this data, right? And it will automatically, we'll make sure that we plug in that data with a loop, and it will automatically present that data. Okay, it will automatically present that data. So that is basically, what components will be used for. Okay, that is basically how it works. Now, the ability to put in those data, we basically we call that props, right? Properties. So you should be able to, pass in data as properties. Okay, we'll get to that shortly as well. So this is very similar to how we next native HTML elements, but Vue implements its own component model that allows us encapsulate custom content and logic in each component, right? So let's see an example, all right? So this is how you want to, so this is how you would define a simple, okay, let's see, what do we have here? Okay, this is just describing, um, that was just describing a Vue templates file, right? A Vue file, okay? So yeah, this is an example of how you can actually, embed or create a component, right? But we're going to use the template. We're going to use the template pattern here. So let's go ahead and we're going to create something that looks like this. So take a look at this. We have a button counter, right? Implemented separately, right? That was implemented separately. And then we're able to import it in here and use it inside this particular file, right? So we had it separately, but now we brought it in here and, we used it inside the separate file. Okay, let me take a look at the charts in case you have any questions as we then proceed to create our own components in our project. All right, so if you have any questions before we start, we're going to do that right now. We'll create the component in here and use that component inside our home view. Okay, by the way, remember that this is running already, so you can copy this link and access this link on your browser. All right, so let's replace what we have there. This is basically, what you get when you create a new project, right? And yes, you can start by, taking them off if you don't want them. Okay, so you see, When I refresh, I just took off that welcome section there. All right. So we can take off the whole thing. If you don't want any of this, I mean, feel free to take it off. All right. So let's take it off. That's in the home view, by the way. Yes, you can choose to take it off completely from here, right? So if you want to do that, you can take it off completely from here. So we can just probably comment this out for now. Um, yeah, let's also comment this out for now. All right. Okay, so let's see what else do we have there. So yeah, we have router view, and of course router view is giving us the first item, which is home view, because if you go to index says when we are on the home part, render the home view. Okay, when we're on the home part, render the home view. So we can go into the home view and put in our styling here so that we can have that rendered on the front end. Okay, so let's just take that off. You see that this was also a component that was imported. All right, so that is welcome. We're going to create our own right now and then render it here. Okay, if I go back, you see we don't have any item here. Okay, because of the theme, let's just go into assets, main, and we are simply going to create our own styling. So let's just delete all these things that we have there for now. Let's take off. By the way, base.css contains all the coloring and all that. So if I refresh now, you see we just have a blank page. All right. If I bring that back, you see it brings back the previous style because all those styling are found inside base.css. So we looked at this yesterday. You see all these styling. You're probably familiar with all these things, working with variables and all that. Let's just take that off because this is a simple example here. So we need box sizing, border box, that is fine. Margin 0. The body, we have a couple of things here. Let's just keep it as white. All right. Yeah. What else do we have here that we probably don't need? The transition, not necessary. Okay. So let's take off the transition completely. The font family, well, that's fine. Font size, let's take that off. Take off these other guys as well. All right, so now we just have a blank page, and we can start off by testing, just to see if this works, right? Let's go into that welcome. Let's go into that home view, and let's just put like a p tag and say hello world. Okay, so I just saved that now. Okay, so let's save that. Let's see what we have. So it says the view element is missing an ending tag. I think that's an error. Okay, so now you see we have hello world. Okay, let me quickly look at the charts. Okay, let me zoom in on this as well. I have not seen any message in the chat, so my assumption is that we're good. So let me know in the chat. If you have any questions, drop it in the chat. If you're following, then I will continue. Right? I need to see like 2 or 3 messages. If you're following, let me know in the chat so I can continue. If you have any questions, drop your questions in the chat. All right, so let me see the messages. If you're following, let me know in the chat. I'm waiting for those messages, guys. If you're following, let me know in the chat. Okay. All right, so I can see we are following. Nice. Okay, good. All right, so let me just take this back to I think 150% is fine. I want you to see it clearly, but in order to make this more interesting, I am going to do like a speed code for that for like a simple styling, right? So we're going to create a very simple style, and we'll move that item into a component. So let's recreate that block tag, right? So let's do that. Let's start by creating a component. Let's just say new file, and we'll call this blog card. Okay, .view. All right. So this is blog card.view. We need to have the templates. We need to close the templates. We need to have our style. Okay, let's close the style. So we don't have a script section yet, but I'm going to show you how to use that script section to include what we call the properties. We'll get to that shortly. Okay, someone said the framework are just strange. Yes, frameworks are always strange. Just take your time, look at the documentation, don't rush. Okay, don't rush. So you need to have like a new mental model of thinking about things when you use a framework, right? When you get to React, when you get to Svelte, when you get to Ember, whatever it is. Okay, Angular, I mean, you are going to see things from a different perspective. If you also get to build your framework, you are also going to build it in such a way that you believe, or you and the folks building it believe that it's better for developers. That's based on your assumptions, and of course based on the way you think things should be. And then you eventually have a community of people that agree with you, and that's how you start a community, right? So, but for now, this is Vue. It has its own community, its own patterns. So we get to lean in and learn and follow up with that pattern, right? Along the line, if you choose to move to a different framework, yes, it means you're going to learn like new set of patterns. But at the end of the day, some of these some of this meaning, right? The meaning of components, the meaning of routing, and the rest of them is going to be the same thing across multiple frameworks, just probably different implementation. So let's move on. Let's move on. So we have the template, and we'll create a div. So this we'll call a card. So this is the card, right? The card itself. Okay. So within that card, we'll probably have an image section, right? Yeah. So we'll have an image section, and this image, sorry, img src. Okay, so we don't know what this image would look like yet. Let's just put ALT. We're not bringing in any image right now, so sample image. And then we also have, all right, so we have, like the title, right? So we have, and I keep making these mistakes, okay? So that should be H2. Let's do H2 as well here. So this is the blog title. All right, then description, so that should be P, okay? P, blog description. All right, so we're going to have that description in there. So for the style, so when we put scoped here, we are saying that the style that we create here should not affect another component, right? So someone is saying, just to be clear, sir, hope it's the HTML file we are rendering and not the Vue files in the Vue's directory. Okay, so let me explain that again. Now, the HTML file you're seeing is what will enable that rendering. So yes, the HTML file is what is actually rendering, right? But then these items are being compiled on the fly, right? So that by the time it renders on your browser, everything is wrapped into this ID, right? So if you go ahead and probably right click and say view page source, so you see what you are seeing here is actually that HTML file. So that's for Botch Tech, okay? So you see that what you're seeing here is actually what you have on the HTML file. But then everything that is being rendered into that div, right, is what you have within the views, okay? Okay, you said why are there nested templates everywhere? Yeah. So okay, let me take that again. When you create a view file, Butch, when you create, I think your name is Buchi, right? Butch, okay. So when you create a view file, the view file is meant to have a template section which would contain your HTML code, what you know, right? How to create the HTML already. Okay. The style section would contain your CSS. And then you also have a script section that contains your JavaScript. Now, remember we said components. Okay, so every component should be able to probably have a style, have a template, and have a behavior, which is what you do within the script. All right. So just look at this as a standard way of working with Vue. Now it's not even compulsory to have the script. It's not compulsory to have the style. But yeah, you probably have something you want to present, which is going to come on that template. You can't do it outside of template. This is not going to work. Okay, so it has to be within a template. So the template section holds your HTML, the script section holds your JavaScript, and then the style section holds your CSS. Remember, this is .vue. .vue is a file extension, right, that works with Vue projects. Okay, so if you don't follow the standard, when this is being interpreted, it's going to see this as an error if you don't have templates. So this is going to give you an error because it cannot figure out where your HTML files, your HTML code is. Okay, so try to understand that. All right. So forget about don't overthink the presentation. But at the end of the day, this is what you are rendering, and then these items are being compiled to be able to appear within this particular app. This particular app instance based on what you have defined, based on what you have created. That's actually happened here. So if you look at this under the main.js, we import the style, we import the core create app from Vue, right? We import the base, which is the app.vue, right? And we also import the router. Okay, then we activate the router right here. We'll get to talk about this later, but the point is we're using Vue Router, so it will activate the plugin, for Vue Router, and this is it right here. So we're creating our app. We're saying our app should use the router that we already have here. So this is taking us to the router file. As you can see, /router points to /router. And when you have an index file within any folder, you don't necessarily need to do this, right? Index.js, but it's still the same thing. /index.js is exactly the same thing as just having, so long as it's indexed, it is seen as the base, right? As the default item that we should select, even if we don't include it. Okay. So someone is saying, how is the app.vue different from other components? Yes. So the app.vue is the base, right? This is what renders every other thing. If there's nothing in here, nothing will be rendered. Do you understand? This is the main. So just look at this. We have views, we have components. Okay. So inside the source, we have views, components, and then we have the base app.vue. So app.vue is where you define, the base. So by putting router view, everything we have in the router can then be presented on app.vue. You understand? Then app.vue itself, after collecting every, page or views or components and all that, depending on what you want here, app.vue itself then, look at it. So you see, we're saying we're creating app, okay? So app.vue itself is what would then, take everything, right? It will take every single thing that you have put within that app.vue, to take everything and put that, inside the create app instance from app.vue, puts it into create app, right? And then it mounts it on ID of app, right? Which is then, mounted here. Index that HTML again, yeah. So which is then mounted here. Hope that's clear, Obasi. Hope that makes sense. Bodge, hope that makes sense. Let me know in the chat. Let me see your feedback if you understand my explanation. Okay? And if any other person is confused or you have any other question, please ask a question in the chat. Let's take it right away. Okay? Let's take it right away. Let's proceed. I am waiting for the feedback, Obasi. Bodge, ask your questions in the chat. The voice is breaking. Okay. Let me. Is it the same for every other person? Is it the same for every other person? Okay, Obasi said very clear. Okay, JP, maybe you can check your network. All right, check your connection, please. All right, so what about Butch? Let's proceed. Okay, so back to the components. We created a view, a block card.view file here, and we have added the image, the H2, right? We also added the description. Okay, we're going to add some style, and I want us to simply, get a sample image from Unsplash, right? So I'm sure you know Unsplash, okay? So let's open Unsplash so that we can grab a sample image from here, all right? So I have a couple of, sample images. We can go with this, okay? So I can simply, I think I can right-click and just say copy image address. I believe that should work. Let's go back to our code here and we'll just paste it in here. So I believe that will give us like the image. We just want something to be presented there, okay? So that's all I want for now. So let's save. All right, so let's save. And back in the scope, it's breaking. Okay. Amaka, can you confirm that? Okay, so if you can't hear me, if it's breaking on your end, drop a message in the chat, so I'll be very sure. Right? If it's breaking on your end, drop a message in the chat. Thank you. So style scoped. So I'm simply going to proceed to style our card. So let's style our card. We're going to style the card right here, and of course we can also style the image of the card, right? We can style the H2, which is the title, as well as the P, right? Okay, so we're simply going to say font size for the P item there. We are going to put that as 14px, right? The H2, we are simply going to say, okay, color, maybe 1E, 1E, 1E. Right, let's do that for this guy as well. Okay, and we're going to have a font size to be set to, I don't know why this IntelliSense is, let's do 18, 16. Okay, so now we have the color and the font size for the image. We're simply going to say height, give us a height of 100%, give us a width of 100%. I want it to fill, whatever container it finds itself, and object fit, just make it cover, right? So I'm sure you know this stuff already. Let's go into the card and we'll say give us a width of 100%. The idea is we're going to put this within the grid, right? But the grid is not going to happen here. The grid is going to be on. Now, how am I sure? So, some people can hear me clearly, but then some people are complaining that my voice is breaking, right? Okay, give me a second. Give me a second. Let's switch to a different. That was very funny because this is probably the best network here. Um, okay. Uh, yeah, just to confirm, Amaka, please let me know if you can hear me. Okay, so guys, let me know in the chat if you can hear me. Okay, so it's the person's network, yeah? Okay. I switched my network anyways, but let's continue. Let's continue. Okay, so we have the width here. We are going to have the height of this card, and the height is we're going to stick to maybe 350 px, right, or even 300. But let's just do 350. Let's do 350 px, right? And we already have the Okay, thank you, Binta. Okay, so we have the size of our image and all that. We want this to give us position of relative so that the image in here will not exceed the relative position. So we have the width of 100. So we want this to be 300 px, right? If that's what you want. Yeah. Okay. So within the grid, we're going to make that adjustment. All right. Now we have the blog title, the blog name, let's just see what it would look like here. So within this network I switched to is terrible, right? From what I can see. I'm taking it back. Okay. Okay, yeah, apologies for that. I think it's this is probably better. Okay, I hope you can still hear me. So I'm going to do a margin here, right? To add some space. Okay, I want items, the card itself. So the card itself, we have image. Apart from the image, we also want a situation where we have some padding in there. So let's just put in a simple padding right here. So I'm going to say padding. Padding should be 10 px, right, or 12. Okay, and we just have like a border radius. I'm sure some of you might be wondering, okay, why are you coding without testing? Why are you are not seeing what you're doing? It's because, and I also wanted to learn this, right? You should learn to imagine your designs. Most times you don't always have to test here and there. Just create something first and trust your guts, right? So think about what you're doing. We have the padding of 12 px, we have border radius of 12 px, and if we have a border radius of 12 px here, our image should probably have a border radius of maybe 6 px or something, right? Let's just divide that by 2. We have the image that should be on that as well. So now we can go to the home view, which is what we have presented there. We can import that particular item. I think it's your network. If I see 2 or 3 people complain, then I'll probably make an adjustment. Okay. So we have yeah, we can go ahead. Okay. Let's present again. All right. Okay. Yeah. I think I Yeah, but I'm sharing again now. So let's continue. Okay. I hope it's better. Apologies. So I hope it's better. Now we're going to bring in the blog card, right? From component slash blog card. Okay. So let's render the blog card right here. So let's render that block card. Let's see what that would look like. If we go back to this page, our Byte app, let's close this. So you see, this is what we're looking at here. We have the block title. I think we forgot to take off one of those items, the hello world item. Let's take that off. So you see, we have the blog title, we have the image, okay, and then we also have the blog description. All right, so our description, I mean, it seems like I need to take back my money from that secondary school. So blog description, right? So we have I there. We also want to probably set like a good margin. Okay, so that's not necessary, but yeah, within the main we can just do that main, and we can just have like a width of 80%, right? Margin 0 auto. Okay, margin 0 auto, just to let things sit properly in the center like this. So now you see we have yeah, let's go back to 100%. So we have one card, just one card, okay? If I go back into the home view, this is where we have that one card. I can simply say V4 I in 10, right? Probably I just want to know having 10 cards would look like, right? So you see, it actually gives us 10 cards. But funny enough, we have a problem with the text, right? So the text is not rendered properly, right? The text on that card is not rendered properly. And yeah, I mean, we can of course fix that by the time we begin to pass in some properties, right? Yes, we would fix that. But you get my point now that we can actually arrange, like a series of items, with a simple loop here. Let's start by putting that loop, putting the card in a div that can serve as a grid of items that can actually hold a grid. Okay, so we can say we have a class of blocks. All right. So now let's style that. Let's style that. Right. And we're simply, use the other time. Okay. Not a big deal. So we can simply say display of grid, and we just say grid template columns. Repeat, because we want to have it, arranged properly. Okay. So auto fit. Then we and you use it. So 300 px 1fr. Okay. By the way, put a comma. Okay, so go ahead and try this again. So we can say, V4. Let's just say V4 I in 5. Okay, so the idea is this is not going to give us what we want. What that is going to do instead is it's going to, move. It's going to create like 5 instances of this. So that was wrong. This should actually appear here. So now this is going to give us, 5 of those items. So you see we have 5 of those items, right? The title should be displayed behind, but because of some of the style that we still have, affecting this page, affecting this page. So let's see where that style is coming from. Okay, let's see where that error is coming from. I think that error is actually coming from this base file, right? That's what I think is going on here. Let's take off that. Okay, let's take off some of these things here. I think it's actually coming from here. I'm not very sure, but let's figure it out. Where is it coming from? Okay, let's only keep the universal selector. Save that. Let's see. We still have a little bit of a challenge. All right, let's go back to the block card and let's set a height for the block card. Let's do 250 or 200 px. Save that. Was that height? Oh, sorry, that was the width. That was the width. So let's do height 200 px. Save. Okay. All right. So this is it. So now we have those blog items rendered right here. Okay. And for the height, we can also do 300. So that's already looking too much. But yeah, this is it. We have our blog, right? So with our block card is the component itself, right? And we can basically, make this better by adding properties. Then you see what we did there in the home view. This is where we actually import that component, right? And then we perform that loop right here. Okay, our component is sitting in isolation. We can make an adjustment to the component, and everything that will be rendered would also, contain the same pattern, right? So which means our component is okay. Next, we're going to pass in some data, right? So we're going to make our component accept properties. Okay, so we'll make our component, which is this particular component we've created, right? The block component accept properties. Okay. All right. So let's do that. Let's do that right now. By the way, let me look at the charts. I didn't want this session to go beyond 1 hour, but I think I really need to those questions, right? So you know what? Drop your questions in the chat so I can take them in the next 1-2 minutes before we continue. I want to make sure you guys are following me, right? So drop your questions in the chat so I can take them before we continue, right? So if you can hear me, drop your questions in the chat. I'm currently looking at the chat. Right, let's be fast with that. Drop your questions in the chat. I'm looking at the chat. Please, let's be fast. Okay. Okay, well, I'm not seeing any questions yet, so I'm assuming we are following. If you're following me, go ahead and drop a message. Just let me know that you're following me. Okay, just say following if you're following me. If you understand what we are doing, go ahead and drop following in the chat. We'll get to the router. The router is to take you from one page to the other. We'll get to the router shortly. If you're following me, drop a message in the chat. Make me understand that, make me know that you're following me. Let's be fast. I just need 2 or 3 messages. Okay, that's 1, 2. Okay, let's have the third one. Let's have the third one. Okay, so just 2 people. All right. Okay, we're good. Now we're trying to make this dynamic. We're trying to put in that ability to be able to accept data, right? So if you want to be able to accept data, it means you're going to include what we call properties, right? So you can also find this in the documentation. They're called props, okay? And now we're going to bring in a prop. So let's start by adding the export default. By the way, what we are using here is known as the options API. We're going to get the part where we use what we call the composition API, but let's not think about that. We'll get there and I would explain the difference, right? This is the pattern that was introduced in the early days of Vue, right? A lot of people use it. I personally use it a lot these days, right? Even till now, but it depends on the project. So you can get into a project, or you can be starting a project yourself, and you want to utilize the composition API because it has some other set of benefits where you see they use this instead, and you don't need any of this, right? But it has its own way of doing things. Now, the reason why I usually start by teaching people how to use the options API is because we have a lot of projects currently that are still running on the options API. So you get into a company using Vue, there's a tendency that you will find the options API. So we'll start from there, and then along the line, we'll migrate into using the composition API. So you get to learn, both patterns. Okay. So now we're going to add the props, and the props we're adding. So you define it this way: props. All right. So the props would contain, the image, right? We're going to pass in a link for image. We're going to pass in a link for let's say for the text, right? Maybe the ALT text. From here I just put a sample, right? So we're going to pass in the image. Let's call that the image source. Okay. So that's we're going to pass it in this way. So this is the props for the image source. When you define a prop, you have to put in a type, which is not compulsory though, but yeah, you have to do it this way. So let's put in the type, and you can also tell us if it's required or not. Okay. So I can say true. If I say true, it means this is required. It means I must pass this in. All right. If I say false, it means this is not required. Okay. So let's keep that as true. We need to pass in the ALT text. So let's call that ALT text, right? That is also a string, all right? So that is what will appear right here, okay? Now we need to pass in the block title, okay, and the description as well. So let's put that as well. This is another prop title, right? The the last one there we have is description. Okay, so now we have these are the props, these are the properties that we need to send in when we are using this component. So whenever we call this component, we need to send in these properties, right? Because those properties we're sending in is what we'll use to display these items here. So it means we have to go ahead and include these items right inside this section. So now let's take off the image that we put in there statically, right? So if you are passing in those items, you have to show that, I want to pass in that item by putting this, the column sign here, because we want that item that we pass in to come in dynamically, right? So we're not putting in like the original link here. This is more like holding the variable, right? Let's call it the variable. It's holding whatever value that is passed in. It will appear right here. So same thing for the ALT, right? So we'll call that ALT text, right? Now for the H1 or for the H2 or the P tag, this is not it's not an attribute, right? So what we have to do is to use mustache, right? Because it's not an attribute. So we'll call this title. Do the same thing here. We'll call this description. Okay, let's save that. So this is what we have. Title, description, they are going to be gotten from here, right? Make sure you check the spelling, because most times usually make that mistake. I do that myself, make a lot of mistakes when it comes to some of the spellings, especially when I'm rushing through, right? So image source, ALT text, title, description. If you get some of these spellings wrong, your component might not work, and then you start debugging. So always make sure you check it properly, right? So now we have our component with dynamic entries, right? These items will be sent in, and just to show you an example, if we go back to the home view, right now we have to then pass in those values in here, right? So we have to pass in those values, such as the image source, right? So we'll pass that value in here like this, okay? So we're going to also pass in the other values, so it can be, I think, ALT text, all right? We'll pass in the title like this. We'll also pass in the description. Okay, so we're going to pass in this, set of values. Let's start with the ALT text. I'm going to call this a simple image or a simple card. Okay, blog card. So for the title, blog, let's just say Introduction to Vue.js. Okay, description. This is an intro blog describing or teaching us Vue.js. And then in the image source, we can go back to the browser and we can try to, you see, we already have this rendered, right? So we can come in here and just grab that image again, right click, copy image address. So let's go back in here, we'll paste that in, we'll save. You see, we have that particular card rendered. Introduction to Vue.js. This is an intro blog teaching us Vue.js. Now we're not looping through a data yet, but just to show you how the card and the component is actually working, right? To give you a sense of how this works, right? And how, okay, so I can see some messages that says we're following. Now, before I include like a series of texts, right? Then I use a for loop on this. Let me know in the chat if you are still following, okay? I have 21 people. I'm only seeing about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 responses. Let me know if you're still following. Let's be fast so we don't take too much time again. And remember, if you haven't gone through the directives, I remember I mentioned yesterday that you should go through it, but then I realized this morning that I forgot to push this repository to GitHub. Apologies for that. I will push it to GitHub after this class so you can have access to this. So yeah, let me know in the chat if you're following. I want to see more messages dropping in the chat, okay? Obasi, Bodge, Adinlewa, Kende, Edwin, Wakwe, good. Binta, okay. All right, that makes sense. I'm only seeing one message. Joy, good. Okay, so let's continue. So now we're able to render. This, item, right? So we have the block card. This is the component we have created. Okay, so this is the component we have created. We passed in the image source. We passed in the ALT text. Okay, we passed in the description. All right. So Dairo is saying the props is somehow confusing. Let me take that again. So Dairo, the first thing we want to do, think about it this way. We are building a blog, right? And on the blog, on the homepage of the blog, we have different cards, right? The way you see some other blog websites where they have multiple blogs displayed, right? These items are not they were not implemented with HTML one after the other. So you have those data coming from your database, right? And of course, from the front end, you call a backend, and that backend will fetch it from the database. Now, when the backend fetch it from database, the backend will send it to the front end. So when it comes to the front end, it comes as an array of objects with the blog title, the blog description, the author, like a bunch of things. Okay, it comes like a bunch of records. Okay, depending on what you want to present. When those items come, what you probably want to do, what you want to do in that scenario, is to have a blog, a blog component. So the component is going to be kind of like an example, right? It displays your blog this way, the blog card this way. Maybe when you now click on this, it takes you to a page that shows all the details of the blog, including the entire blog description. Well, we are not doing that on this call today, but I'll show you probably for the next call or by the next time we meet, okay? So right now we created a blog card component, which is this, okay? But then we don't want to put in these things manually. We want to be able to pass in those values, right? When we call the blog card. Now we're calling that blog card in the home view, but we can choose to call the blog card in a different view. We can create a new view here and decide to use the same blog card component, right? So in order to be able to pass in values, we need to create properties. That's why we call it props, right? The properties, okay? So what are the properties that this particular blog card should have? Okay, an example of the property is the image source, right? Which means when we create this, when we call this blog card anywhere, we want to be able to pass in the source, the image, right? The image source. We want to be able to also pass in the ALT text, which is the text that describes, the image, right? We want to be able to pass in the title as well and the description. We don't want to statically put that in. We want it to come in from wherever we are creating that, wherever we are initializing or calling that component, right? So we use the props property here. We call props as an object, and then we pass in all those values as sub-objects. Now, mind you can even decide to say, oh, I don't want to pass in all these guys here. I just want to have a single object, right? And I can call it blog properties, right? And that blog properties is then going to be maybe a type of object. You can do that. No doubt, right? You can do that. You can pass in an object, and then in here, you just have to say blog properties, the title, blog description. We would get to do that, right? But when you do it this way, we're just saying, okay, we are initializing, we are in these items one after the other, which is also fine, right? Because now you can now specify the type of each item that you are receiving. Does that mean using an object doesn't make sense? Using an object is fine, right? It's okay. It depends on you, the developer, right? But in here, you are specifying so that the person using this, it will be easy for the person to say, oh, I understand that, okay, the image source should be a string, probably a different item should be a number, a different property should be a boolean. You are specifying one after the other. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so basically the view can contain numerous components depending on which page I want. So the view itself is a page, and it can contain so many components. It can contain the nav components, the footer components, the sidebar, if you have a sidebar. All these things can be components. Navigation can be a component, and you can put it on so many views. Okay, Obasi. That's how you basically build front-end applications using component-based frameworks like React, Vue, Svelte, and the others. Okay, so now we have this component. I hope that made sense. Dairo, okay? Binta is saying, did you choose to use one card as displayed in the browser, unlike the initial multiple cards? Yeah, I chose to. This was just an example. So this is it, just one card. I just call this once. If I want to have multiple of this, I can just say V4, right, which is what we've been doing. And without necessarily bringing in a custom data, if I just say I in 5, I've just created a loop to create 5 of this, right? And create 5 of this, okay? It's just a simple loop. If I say I in 2, it will create 2, okay? If I say I in 20, it will, yes, create 20. Okay, so this is me just making this, just showing an example. But now we are actually going to have an array. So let's go ahead and say we have an array. So scripts, okay, scripts right here. and I'll say export default. Okay, so now of course this is how we just like what we did here, export default. We're now trying to bring in those values, right? So go to data. Remember I taught you can use data. You can use it like this where you return the data, or you can as well just go ahead and put this shorthand like this. Okay, so now we can have all the blocks. All right, so we have all the blocks, which is an array of items. So we have first item. Now this first item is going to contain first item. The first item is going to contain the image. So we have the image source. Let's put that here. So we can have ID. Every block would have an ID, like block 1, block 2, stuff like that. So now we have the image source. Let's put it this way, right? And the image source, this is the source. That's the link of the image, right? So we'll put a comma there. ALT text. So let's cut this as well. Okay. So now let's put the ALT text, which is ALT text, just like this. Okay. Now let's put in the description. I think I forgot the title. So that's the title. Let's take that as well. Title. Okay. Make sure it's in a string because that's what you're. I'm going to copy the whole thing, drop it in here, and change this value to a key value pair. So this is valid, right? This is one block. Okay, let's duplicate this. So let's do 2. Okay, so now let's do 3. Let's just make this 4. So now we have 4 objects within this block array, right? 4 objects. Now let's put some title. Let's just change this to this blog. Okay, let's just say blog item 4. Right. So that's the title as well as the ALT text. Okay. So this is an intro blog teaching. Okay, that's fine. All right. This is an intro blog teaching Node.js. Okay. I'll just change this now to blog item 3. Okay. Also change the value here to blog item 3. So this is me just changing these items. Okay. Blog item 2. Blog item 2. Let's say this is teaching us CSS, right? Okay. HTML. Let's call blog item 1, right? Of course, right here, blog item 1. Okay. So now we have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So for the images, yes, where are each of those images? So now you can see that this is this no longer contains any dynamic data that comes from here. So now we're saying for blog, so for blog in blog, each blog item in that, right? So because put it in like this, and now we can say blog dot what image src. So when you say blog dot, you are referring to this, right? Image src. Okay. Blog description, blog dot description. Now remember that you need to put in these guys because you are grabbing seed alt text the blogs dot blogs back in here. Most times it's going to give you an empty screen. So yes, we probably have an error. Let's go back and figure out where that error is coming from. Okay, so let's see. We said for blog in blogs, right? Let's make sure we confirm that. So this is blogs. I want to figure out why we have an error. So we have 1, 2, 3. Check very well. Let's see to make sure we have all our commas in place. Okay. All right, so I won't miss anything. Maybe the spelling. Let's check. So we have image src, we have alt text. Okay. So what are we missing exactly? Title, description. Okay, that seems correct. Okay, so another thing we could do is inspect. Just the same way you inspect your regular HTML and CSS code. When you inspect, go to console, right? When you go to console, you probably see the error you are having here. Let's check that properly to see the error we're having. Okay, so let's see. Where are we having that error? Hmm. Okay, let's fix this. Now we're going to take this one at a time so we can at least figure out. Now this is the debugging bit, right? We want to figure out where that error is coming from. Okay, so we actually let's see, what did we do here? So we actually brought in the values. The values seem correct, right? Let's check that again under our data, right? The value actually seems correct, but it seems like let's see, what is the problem there? Okay. Hmm. All right, so we said for blog in blogs, and then we passed in the blog.image, the blog.alt text, the blog.title. What are we missing? The description as well. Okay, let's try to fix this. So if I have like return, just hold on. I don't think that's is the error, by the way. Let's just see. Let's format this properly. Okay. So I said export default, and we have our data. Then we also returned the value we have in there. All right. And then we did a loop. So we did a loop to say for blog in blogs, take each of those items. Let's go back in here. Let's refresh this page. Oh, I see. Okay. So I think that was a problem. All right. So the fact that yeah, I needed to actually include include this and return the entire object right here. Okay, because I was probably because I was returning an array of items. Yeah. So now you see what we have is we're able to render each item: blog one, blog item two, blog item three, and blog item four. Yeah. Okay. So we can also change those images as I mentioned. All you have to do is come in here. Let's just pick some random images, copy image address, paste that image here. So you see that that image will also change automatically for that particular item, right? So you can do the same thing for the other images. So copy image address. Of course, most likely you probably have images locally, right? In the next class we'll have, I'll show you how to put in your local images. Okay, but it's basically the same pattern. It's not a big deal. So you copy the image address here as well, and we just drop that here. So let's do Control V. Take one last one. I think that's yeah. We just need one last one. Copy image address, and we'll put that last one here. All right. So I'm just replacing those images. So save, copy, and paste, and I save. So now you see we have different images, with these items. Of course, because of the way we implemented this, is also a bit responsive, right? So yes, this is how you simply create and work with components in Vue, right? Very basic, very simple components, right? I hope that makes sense. Now let me see your questions. Do we have any? Is there any confusion here whatsoever? Can functions be a prop? What if we want to add like a button to the block card? Yes, you can add a button and then add a trigger. Okay, so you add an event and you are able to call that event, from a different page. You will not pass it in as a prop, right? It will be a function, right, within your method section. And yes, you can call that. We'll look at how to do that. Not a big deal. We'll look at how to do it. We're taking this step by step. And of course, we don't have enough time, but at least you'll see we're able to import a blog. We're able to import the block card component, and we're able to render, by looping through all the block items we have in here, and we render multiple blocks. So imagine you have another block, right, coming from your backend. The moment it is added here, right, so it is automatically going to appear as well. So let's just say this is teaching React, for example. When I save, you see a new item is added here, blog item 5. this is an intro blog teaching us React. Okay, I hope that makes sense. All right. Okay, so yes, there are other things we're going to cover. I really want us to cover most of these things. So probably during the workshop on Friday, right, we would come back and cover some of these things again. We'll take a look at the life cycle hooks I mentioned. We're going to cover that today, but because of time, we cannot do that. So we have different hooks. We have, you can set up a component or display something, or run a particular piece of code, when your page is created, or before it is mounted, before it is mounted on the DOM, before it is updated, right? Or even when it is mounted, or before it is unmounted. So these are basically different hooks that you would have to understand. And yes, I am going to explain each and every one of them. And yes, you can also come to this documentation, read through, so that when you come to class, you can have enough questions to ask me, right? I would love that. So read through the documentation, come with your questions, right? We'll talk about them one after the other. What you mentioned right now, Botch Tech, for your question, it's working with events basically, right? So you're going to create something and then attach an event listener, so you know when to call that particular event. When it's clicked on, right? So yeah, we'll talk about that. We'll talk about that. But I mean, just to show you like a very basic example before I end this session, if I go back to the block card right here, so based on what you just described, say you have a button, right? So let's just call that a button. Let's put in a class of BTN. And then we have a read blog, for example. So we have button. Okay. So if I go back to this page, you're going to see that, read blog. Let's just do a bit of margin bottom. Okay. Then PX. And then I'm going to simply say button, that's BTN. Okay. So width 100%, padding maybe 10. All right. So 16 PX. Okay. And I would simply say um, background none, or border none, background blue, color white. Okay, so let's just work with that simple one. Let's see what this would look like. Oh, this is terrible, by the way, but yeah, it's a good starting point. Border radius 4px. Okay, so yes, that is not very good, but we can start off from there. For some reasons, I can't manage that color. It's a terrible one. All right, so we have our button, but of course, our card is not really giving us what we want because we set a particular limit. So now I've taken off that limit and we have the read block. Okay, so you see we have the read block there. Let's add a cursor of pointer. All right, so when we are here, you see we're able to click on these buttons, right? These buttons we have right now is inside the card, right? So within the component, you can choose to add a function. So we have props. You can choose to come down here and add a method. So we can add methods and we can say button clicked. Okay, so we can simply do this and alert. You clicked on read log. Okay, so we can attach this here by saying at clicked. Is it at clicked or click? I think we need to verify that, but let's go back and test it. So when I click on this, it says you clicked on read blog. So you see, we're able to attach some of these actions. But then, it goes beyond this because you probably want to have, there are some scenarios where you want to call something, a function that is in a different place, probably not in the same page or in the same component. Not a problem, right? You will learn how to do that as well. And I will make sure, come with your questions. I will definitely teach you how to do all that. All right, so sometimes a tag might have other tags in it. How do one go about that in this manner? For example, the description might have the span. Yeah. Not a problem, right? We are going to cover all that as well. I mean, when you're working with props, you should be able to put in, the props in the right place, where you want to use the prop. Okay, so Obasi will look at that. What about if we use the button as a component in order? Yeah, you can use the button as a component, as a different component, and import. So you can have components embedded within, like bigger components, right? So you can have like a small. We call this, even in design, when you're working with designers, guys, you know, as front-end developers, when you're working with designers, you have the designers giving you what's called tokens, right? Like avatars, right? Buttons, okay, with different states, hover, and the rest of them. You can choose to, you know, create your own button, you know, component, right? And you have different states, maybe or different types, different variants, okay? Primary button, secondary button, and all that. You can create a button component with all those customizations, and then you can import the button component into your card component, right? So you can do that, and yeah, we're taking this step by step. But yes, you can actually import your custom button components, right, and pass in whatever props you have. Okay, you can do that, and then you are using it within a bigger component. You can even import a card component and use it in a bigger component if you probably don't want to pass in the card component straight to the main page. Okay, so components can be embedded within other components. Just have that in mind. But let's take it, you know, one step at a time. Don't rush. Don't pressure yourself, and you know, don't try to overthink these things. Take it one step at a time. Review what you have learned today. Try to understand it. Come back with your questions. We'll move on to the next step. Okay. And if you have questions, do well to ask your questions on calls like this. It's 9:30 already. I took an extra 30 minutes from your time. Apologies. I'll see you guys next time. Do have a wonderful evening. Bye.